Good afternoon, everyone. Les, Mark, and everyone who has joined us today. Mark, thank you for the kind words. Before I begin, Les mentioned a few people who are here with us today, and it's always risky when you start to mention names because you may forget to mention someone. But there are a couple people I want to acknowledge who have joined us today, one of whom is Arnie Wexford. Arnie was talking about preventing harm related to commercialized gambling long before anybody had any idea what a same game parlay is or knew what the internet was. Arnie's been walking the walk since the 1960s, and it's a privilege to have him here today. And I also know that we are joined by the executive director of my program at LaSalle University, Dr. Leanne Cardacciato. And Dr. Cardacciato and her colleagues at LaSalle have been instrumental in helping me form my public health message and views related to commercialized gambling and addiction, and to build a bridge between my new career as a professional counselor and public health advocacy. So I'm grateful for Dr. Cardacciato being here today as well. We have mentioned a few times, or Mark has mentioned a few times, the words public health. And I think it's extremely important to focus on those words as we go through our webinar today. The purpose of this webinar is to begin to draw attention to the public health issues that are inexorably linked to the explosive growth of commercialized gambling in America. As night follows day and day follows night, public health issues are arising in real time as commercialized gambling continues to spread through America. And when the United States Supreme Court decided the Murphy case in May of 2018, paving the way for the explosive growth of commercialized sports betting, the Supreme Court of the United States was deciding a case on federalism. It was not launching a public health crisis on America. But the result of what has happened is without question a public health issue in America. And as a result, it's going to be incumbent on Congress to act, the executive branch to act, and independent advocates to become educated and aware and understand and involved. And in that vein, I'm going to present some facts for you. We're going to explore some facts and expose some truths about the rapid growth of commercialized gambling with an emphasis on advertising. So if you'd bear with me for just a moment, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. This is always the challenging part for me. I'm optimistic that and of course it is not. There we are. Bear with me just a moment. Mark, if you can, when I get to the beginning, if you or Les can confirm, you can see the Stop Predatory Gambling label.
Yes.
Thank you. We have labeled or titled our seminar, A New Storm of Gambling Advertising, a Threat to Public Health. A lot of my focus is going to be on the National Football League, but please understand, we're focusing on the National Football League because the big game, or dare I call it the Super Bowl, is coming up in 11 days. And the National Football League is the unquestioned juggernaut of sports betting. And the model that has been created by the National Football League and its gambling partners is paving the way for what's happening throughout professional and collegiate sports in America. And I believe you will see from the facts that we present, this is a particular threat to public health. And of course, it has frozen. So we'll begin by exploring some of the facts. For more than 40 years, the commercialized gambling industry in this country has campaigned for self-regulation. But today, we're in an entirely new and unprecedented world where technology, with phones, tablets, computers, and every electronic device, is delivering not only access to sports betting, but casino gambling instantaneously. Advertising completely ignores the risk to public harm and does so through a program the gambling industry has itself created that they coin the responsible gaming movement. Let's take a look at what those words actually mean in real life and ask ourselves whether responsible gaming, as promulgated by the gambling industry, is actually sound public health policy. But before I go any further, I'm going to switch terms because I don't think it's appropriate to refer to what we're dealing with as the gambling industry. Professor James Orford from Oxford has coined the term gambling establishment. And I think this is crucial to understand because we are dealing now not only with gambling companies, but we're dealing with gambling companies acting in concert and partnership with professional and collegiate sports, the NCAA, individual universities, all the major media titans in the world, the teams themselves, and most importantly, state government itself. Those who we would have hoped would be involved in the regulation are actually partners in the gambling establishment. In 2021, as a matter of fact, people in America lost more than $50 billion to the commercialized gambling establishment. Mark mentioned the rapid expansion of sports gambling. This map is actually now outdated. This shows as of January 11th. But now that we're into February, Ohio has come online. So we're at 31 states plus the District of Columbia, actually be 32 now, plus the District of Columbia that have legalized sports betting in the United States. What did this look like in 2021? The commercialized gambling companies spent more than $1.2 billion to acquire new customers. And this amount is expected to come close to doubling in 2022. And the issue becomes, once these customers are acquired, how are they being acquired? And what is the gambling establishment doing with these customers? And how does it comport with the notion of public health? Because as Mark mentioned, as a matter of factual and medical and scientific certainty, gambling is an addictive product, just like heroin, opioids, tobacco, alcohol, cocaine. What is different and unprecedented here is that state government has joined in America with private industry to profit from the marketing and distribution of the addictive product. These words are pulled directly from the diagnostic criteria for gambling addiction. After losing money gambling, one often returns to get even, or referred to as chasing one's losses. As we go through some examples of how the gambling establishment and the gambling companies acquire customers and maintain them and draw them into action, keep in mind this notion of the chase. And begin to ask yourselves whether the model that we are seeing taking place in 2021, in 2022, is A, consistent with public health, and B, sustainable in any way from a public health perspective. I coin it the AAC model. Because the gambling advertising that we're going to look at today is utilized by the gambling establishment to accomplish three interrelated concepts. It's designed to promote these three activities. And we're going to look at a number of real life examples. And as we do, pay attention to access to action, how the gambling establishment is attempting to deliver to the public immediate access to constant action. And whether with an addictive product such as gambling, having immediate and constant access is consistent from a public health perspective. And again, the C is the chase, keeping people in action chasing their losses for as long a period of time as possible. In many ways, commercialized gambling is just like science and math. The longer people remain in action, the more they wager, the more the gambling establishment profits. It can be no other way. It's how the product is designed. Much of that is a topic for future seminars, but it is a factual certainty that the longer people remain in action, chasing action, the more the public will lose as night follows day and day follows night. Let's take a look at a few more facts from a public health perspective. 1 out of every 2 people struggling with a gambling problem contemplates suicide. The link between gambling addiction, and the risk of suicide is real. It is here, it is amongst us. And 1 out of 5 will attempt suicide. I am one of those 1 out of 5. For children and young adults under 25, the risk is even greater. Speaking of children, 39% of children under the age of 17 have gambled in the last year. 30% of those started before age 10. There is overwhelming evidence that the younger a child is exposed to gambling, the more significant the risk of harm. I want to pause on this for a moment as we begin to look at real-life examples of gambling ads and ask you, in addition to considering access to action and chase, I want you to consider the complete lack of any filters preventing children from being exposed to the real-life examples we're about to look at. There is a direct connection between gambling advertising and a harm to children and young adults. Now let's take a look at some of the real-life examples. Just last week, the state of Louisiana went live with sports betting. The ad that you are looking at was sent by Caesars Sportsbook's official gambling partner, Louisiana State University. I am an anomaly in college students, even at the master's level. I'm in my 50s. Most undergraduate college students are between the ages of 18 and 21, too young to gamble, but they received this in an email from Louisiana State University on behalf of Caesars Sportsbook. So let's take a look now at advertising itself and look at some of the truth behind how these ads are designed to work, with a focus on action, access, chasing losses, and the direct exposure to children and young adults. And we're going to start with a leading expert on commercialized sports gambling, and that's NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. Now, as I said at the start, I am not singling out the NFL. However, the Super Bowl is on February 13th, and as you will see in a moment, the NFL led the charge in America, which all professional sports leagues followed, to develop a sports gambling model that I believe once we go through it, you will recognize as a complete threat to public health because of its design. Commissioner Goodell himself once opined that once the character and integrity of NFL football has been compromised and bonds of loyalty and devotion between fans and teams have been broken, football will have been irreparably injured in a manner that cannot be calculated in dollars. So that was Roger Goodell in 2012. Apparently, as of 2021, Commissioner Goodell found a way to calculate it in dollars, and it begins with a B. It begins at $1 billion. Because in 2021, the National Football League named 7 official gambling partners. The first 5 partnerships were valued in excess of $1 billion. 2 additional ones came online to total 7 just before the start of the season. And how does this model work with an emphasis on advertising? It did not end with just naming the partners. The NFL also went into partnership with a company known as Genius Sports. In fact, we now know from Securities and Exchange Commission filings that the NFL has a significant ownership stake in Genius Sports. And the NFL named Genius Sports its distributor of all official statistics and data. And then said, collected $120 million from Genius Sports and an ownership interest, and then said to their 7 gambling partners, you are required to purchase your statistics on NFL football from Genius Sports. But why were they doing this? They were doing this for the creation of something called in-game betting. No longer is gambling relegated to who's going to win the game, how many points will they win by, and the total points. As you'll see in a moment, gambling on sports is now each and every play, every 40 seconds or less in an NFL football game. But it went even further, because what Genius gives to its 7 NFL gambling partners, what they conveniently call customer acquisition tools and fan engagement solutions. In other words, data to bring people into action with access as quickly as possible and keep them engaged, keep them gambling, keep them chasing. That's what the relationship between the NFL, Genius, and the 7 gambling partners means. Here is direct proof. This is taken from one of the 7 gambling partners this past Sunday during the Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals AFC Championship game. You could bet on every play. This slide shows you that on the 7th play of a particular drive, people were being encouraged to bet, will the next play be a pass play or a running play? What I didn't capture for you, and this one even I found slightly shocking. On 4th down in punt formation, the same gambling operator offered action on whether the punt would be a fair catch or not. Instant access to action to chase losses is the model. Let's take a peek at what this looks like in real life and take note of who the star of this particular commercial is.
Good to have you boys back.
You know how it is. You never really left. Slow down, I gotta make my picks. You wanna know this win bet with me?
Win bet. I like where your head's at, but Boston's not covering.
Sure they will.
You gotta do what he says. He's driving.
That's not a rule.
Win bet, huh?
Yep. Bet any game, any time, and you bet with win, so it's the best.
Together.
Hey!
Hope you didn't bet on Boston. You're down 30.
You didn't bet on Boston?
Nah.
None you got? Shaq, did you bet on Boston?
I went with Greg on this one. He has a whole system. Big payout, big payout, big payout, big payout, big payout.
Ooh. Greg.
Yes? Okay.
What is the Greg system?
I pick by color mostly.
A team sport, according to WinBet. Ben Affleck, well reported to be someone who struggles with gambling problems. But it was the very end of that commercial that's most interesting. When Mr. Affleck, who has just lost, he bet on Boston, his friends all won, he puts his arm around someone looking for his next tip. Anyone who has ever lost a sports bet recognizes that moment. And that commercial itself is meant to appeal to someone who has just suffered a loss. Get together with your buddies. Let's keep going. It was a commercial designed to keep people in action chasing losses. Walt Disney once said, our greatest natural resource is the minds of our children.